Welcome to the Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life podcast. I'm your host, Nadia Dela Cruz, founder of the Wayne Dyer Wisdom Community on Facebook and angeltarot.org. This podcast would not be possible without support from loyal fans like you. And I want to give a big thank you to everyone who supports me on Patreon. You can find the link for that and get more details about this podcast at nadiadelacruz.com. Now, my guest today is returning from season 1. You may know him as the pastor who found God outside of religion. He's back today to talk with me about one of Dr. Wayne Dyer's favorite books, The Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East. Tim Nixon, thank you so much for joining me today.
It is definitely great to be here and to be able to share the everything I picked up from these books that Dr. Dyer recommended. So it's great to be here.
Yeah, I know. Thank you. It's always wonderful to speak with you, and I've been on hiatus over the summer, so I'm back to recording podcast episodes again. So it feels great to be back here with an old friend. And I know that these are books that you are passionate about and something that you were eager to speak about today. And these are books that Wayne Dyer was reading right up until the end of his life, something that he mentioned he was passionate about. So I have not gotten very deep into these books. I'm excited to kind of hear your take on it and what you got from them. But for those listeners who didn't have a chance to hear the first episode that we did, maybe you could give us a little bit of backstory about your path to spirituality.
Okay. Yes, I was raised in a fundamentalist Christian faith, very strict. I tell people, if you know Westboro Baptist Church, who was very famous for their protests against a lot of things. The church I grew up in would just inside of that, because they wouldn't be protesting American soldier funerals like Westboro Baptist Church. So then I went into Christian ministry right out of college, went to a Christian ministry, and went on a path of constantly questioning, thinking, rethinking everything I once believed. I became a senior pastor after a while, and then in that began to see there were a lot of inconsistencies between the institutional church and what I read in the Bible, which took me out of the church. I resigned that and then went into, in that time would have been called the secular world, and all along the way we kept trying to connect with other Christians who wanted to do life outside of an institutional church, and then that stayed that way until 2019, where my daughter began to rebel. I'm doing air quotes again, rebel against everything we believed, and that brought us face to face with our beliefs. But first, we told her, because of our beliefs, that she had to. We were kicking her out of our life because that's what the Bible told us we had to do. And over the next couple of weeks, it just did not make sense that a loving God would ask you to do that. So we began to study it, look at it, rethink, listen to other people who were doing what's called deconstructing their Christian faith. And over that time, we lost our view of hell and kicking our daughter out of our lives. And that awakened me. So the deconstruction, moving away from traditional Christianity, opened the doors, and then I began listening to people like Oprah, and I found Wayne Dyer, Rainn Wilson, who was Dwight on The Office, is one of the most spiritual people you can imagine out there. And then so basically I bought Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life on April 18th, 2020, and I started reading Dr. Dyer, and then that led me to Ram Dass, and now I have opportunities. I'm back into teaching. An opportunity opened up at Lighthouse Spiritual Center here in Mooresville, North Carolina, and the leader there, Kendall, has offered me opportunities to come alongside her, to work on the pastoral care, and I got to teach for the first time this past Sunday. So that's my journey.
Congratulations!
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting. I'm glad you're having that opportunity to speak, and I really believe that you're a natural teacher and you have a lot to share. So.
Yes.
It's a good path for you.
A concise, quick story. I told it this past Sunday, and it went about 20, 25 minutes, and that was a short, concise story. of everything
Yeah.
that happened, but it was just constant questioning, constant thinking. And I'm not done. I'm just going to be a questioner the rest of my life.
I think that's a good thing to be. If you follow blindly, then how do you ever know what's in your heart? How do you ever know what's true for you? But I have so much respect for your family, for you and your wife in particular, who, set aside these rather strict beliefs that were dividing your family and found that love was more important, and it led you to a different path, a different way of being. And I don't think a lot of people make that choice. It can be really scary and really hard to walk away from everyone and everything that you know, especially when they're probably telling you you've gone to the dark side and,
Yes.
think that you've fallen in some way. But like Wayne Dyer taught us, you need to be self-directed. You need to be self-driven. And, in my opinion, anything that isn't of love isn't truly of God.
Right.
So
Yep.
sometimes we have to find our own path and make our own way. Yeah. All right. Well, today we are here to talk about Baird T. Spalding's Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East. It is more than a book. It is a volume of, 6 books.
Yes.
It's a whole set of 6 books. There's a lot of content in here, and we're going to go a little bit more into depth into exactly what are these books and what does it cover. But just to give people a little bit of background, I've been reading The Knowing, which is the book that Wayne's daughters, Sage and Serena, put out earlier this year. I think it came out in May. And as I was reading the introduction to this book, I noticed that they had a little quote in here about this book series. And they said, in the final volume of Baird Thomas Spalding's Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East, a series of books our dad was devouring right before he passed away, he underlined, "There is a light that lighteth every man that cometh into the world. That light is eternal, all-powerful, and imperishable. Only that which is subject to birth is subject to death. The light is an extension of God into man. It is not born, nor can it die." And they add, that is The Knowing. This is a great book. It's a very personal story of the Dyer family when they found out that Wayne had passed away and their sort of process after that, and coming back to all of these things that they knew in their heart and the things that both of their parents had taught them. Not everyone may know this, but their mom is a very spiritual woman as well. So amazing family. So let's get to these books.
Okay.
Why don't we start with, who was Baird T. Spalding and when did he live?
Baird T. Spalding was born near the end of the 1800s. So he lived around 95 years. So he died in the 1950s, I believe. I didn't write down the exact dates. But he was a person who, in his book, says that he was raised in India, that he went to the University of Calcutta. He graduated from University of Calcutta at the age of 14. And then he was in America. He had a degree in mining, apparently, that he used here in America.
I don't think they offer those anymore.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah. So he was a mine inspector and did all those types of things here in America. But his book set really, the books that he wrote, what happened was he, as he traveled on telling these stories, there was a woman who had a publisher who said, "Do you mind if I take what you're teaching in volume 1?" That was the first thing that came out, obviously, and that just took off like wildfire. Among the spiritual churches, Unity Church, and there's some other different spiritual churches, meaning metaphysical churches that no longer exist, that would host him and have him teach after he came back from India. And so that book series took off, and so he wrote these 3 books. They ended up telling the whole story in the 3 books, and then he would travel up until the day he died. He was traveling all over America, teaching on these books and talking about what he learned while he was in India.
So there's 6 books.
Yes.
Like, are there different sections? Like, what's covered in books 1 through 6?
So books 1 through 3 are all about his time in the in India, China, the traveling that whole region over there. So that's volumes 1 through 3. So he tells the stories when they went, what they went there for, which was to follow. They'd heard about these lost civilizations. His grandfather had told him about these lost civilizations that were over there that were so much further developed than what we've ever seen. And so he went on a search looking for these civilizations. And while he was there, the people that were escorting him around turned out that they had basically reached enlightenment. And so that it was just the first 3 books are just about all his journeys, traveling around with them, going all over the place for a couple of years, so 3 years. So it just covers his whole time there. Book 4 is a summary of everything they learned from the masters, which we'll get into who those were. It threw me off in book 4 because it starts out with basically the White Brotherhood, which I was like, what am I reading here? But
what does this mean?
right, most people don't know that Hinduism comes out of a group of people called the Aryans, which we're all afraid of because that's the word Hitler used. But it was just a group of people, and so there was a group of 12 different bodies of people that would come together to lift the vibration of the world to bring about peace and power and things like that. So that was the group of people, and they were called the White Brotherhood. So it didn't mean like skin color. It just meant that was their secret society name. And then they said they were birthing a 13th one. So you take all those teachings in book 4, and then book 5 is as he traveled around America teaching these things. There was question and answer times, so it would include what he taught there, and then answer the questions. And then book 6 was things that they found stored that they thought it was just a box of just stuff, and they found it stored. And so they took those articles and pictures. There's pictures from everything that was happening, different correspondence with Mr. Dvorak, the publisher, and different people. And they just published all those, again, with questions and answers that were included in the articles and things. So, and that's the latest edition. That book 6 was added in many years later. It was just 5 volumes, and then they found that and added the 6th volume.
Found some more. So I know that a lot of time was covered. A lot of stories are included in this. Is there a common thread? Is there a theme or a core message to like what he was bringing back from the Far East?
Yes, the common theme is we are all God. We all have a Christ consciousness within us, and that Jesus was the perfect picture of that Christ consciousness. And that Jesus was actually one of the masters of the Far East. And then they tell the story. It's all, growing up, I didn't hear much about this, but where was Jesus during those 30 years he was gone, in the Bible? I mean, from age 12 to age 30, so 28 years or 18 years. Where did he go? There's always been this belief in India that he ended up in India and learned the ways of Buddhism and the Far East teachings. So they tell the story of how Jesus did spend time there and learned all these things, but that he came to show us how to live in Christ consciousness, and that everything he did, which he even stated, I be careful, I don't say which he stated anymore because of my study of the Bible has changed. I say what he is reported to have said in the Bible. You will do greater things than I have done. And so he wanted to show humanity, like when he fed the 5,000, you could do the same thing. That once you reach that level, the law of attraction states that you can create things just by thinking them. And so that happens throughout this book. He feeds lots of people. He heals lots of people. He comes in and out of walls. But it's not just him. All the masters have these abilities. They have the ability to astroplane. And so the common theme is Christ consciousness and God is love, and God is working in us and through us through the vibrations that we send out. God is the most powerful name or word that can be said because of the vibration. They teach the AUM principle in there, which is the, you know, you have Om in Hinduism and things like that, but he says the actual, it should be AUM, is because that covers every syllable that you could possibly say with the human mouth, and so you create the vibrations with the AUM. And so, but the common theme is Christ consciousness. He and Buddha hang out together in this book, the Buddha, you know, Gautama. And it reminded me of another Wayne Dyer thing that I was thinking about, the We Consciousness, that was written by what's her name? Something No, I think it was.
Karen Noe.
Karen Noe. She wrote that, and Wayne said there is a group of higher beings up here, and we operate together to do all these things. And it reminded me of the Masters of the Far East, you know. So
yeah, Esther Hicks, who channels Abraham, you know, that group consciousness is something that comes through a lot with people who channel. So it does make you wonder about how individual we really are. I think there is maybe some part of us that is uniquely us, but at the same time inextricable from the one, from the
right.
the sense of everything. Now, you and I connected last time. I think half of our conversation was about Ram Dass.
Yes.
Big fans of Ram Dass, and he, of course, studied with his guru Maharaji. And now Maharaji spoke about Christ consciousness as well. Do you remember what he said about that?
Well, I remember when Raghu Marcus, who wasn't Raghu Marcus, first went over, you know, and Ram Dass wasn't there, so he just asked Maharaji, because he wanted to sound spiritual, I need a mantra. What should I mantra? He said, meditate like Christ. Or he was asking for meditation, meditate like Christ, and he's like, I have no idea what this means. So Ram Dass shows up the next day, and he's like, Ram Dass, ask him what it means. And Maharaji just welled up with tears, and he said, he's loved. He never died, he just loved. He never died, he just loved. And he also said that Hanuman and Christ were the same, and that, you know, it was also believed that Maharaji himself was Hanuman. And so, yeah, he spoke. I learned more, and this is insulting when I say this to people who are still Christian. I've learned more about Jesus from the Eastern philosophies than I think I ever did as a Christian, just because they love him so deeply compared to the rules of Christianity.
I hadn't really. Now, I'm no expert on Eastern religion. I'm interested, but I'm not an expert. I don't remember hearing about Jesus from India, but yeah, here he's like, I don't know, the cover boy, the poster boy.
Right.
That's what I think. He's like the poster boy for so many religions that seem to have missed the heart of the message, that Christ consciousness is not there, which is really about love and compassion for all and inclusivity. And, you know, if you think about the stories that we know about Jesus, who was running with the vagrants, open arms, you know, like how many Christian organizations really support that?
Right. They can only do that up to a certain point. And that's where I was talking to one of my coworkers last week. He's asking lots of questions, knowing I came out of Christianity. But they can befriend what that's called the unbeliever up until the unbeliever says, I will not believe. And then they have to move on. They can't continue to serve the unbeliever.
It's really just for the purpose of conversion or proselytizing. It's not really about embracing those who are different from you or believe something other than you. It's really there's an agenda.
Yes.
There's an agenda.
And they
believe doesn't feel very honest.
They believe the agenda is to save you from a literal burning hell. But how can and this is where I'm at, and this is what I say to anybody who wants to proselytize me back. Logically explain to me how burning someone in hell for eternity is love. That's all I have. And
Well, it's not.
right, but
I mean, I really believe that hell is of our own making.
yes,
And I'm not even sure if it's something that we experience after death. Although, if you caused a lot of pain to a lot of people and you were willfully ignorant of that during your life, you might all of a sudden become aware of that and be in a lot of pain
right,
for what you've done. But I think that is a self-created hell. I mean, I think heaven is self-created too.
Right.
Except okay, so I dropped the idea of hell long ago, much like you were talking about. But heaven, I was like, heaven, I don't know. Like, we'll set this one aside. Like, because I think that darkness is the absence of light. So there is light. So is that what heaven is? But then when I think of people dying, I don't think of them as just, I don't know, being idle and sitting on a cloud somewhere and being fed grapes or whatever silly notions we have. But then when I think about like Anita Morjani's story of her near-death experience and what she felt as this like sea of unconditional love, which I think is around us all the time. I think it's something that we experience here, but there's a filter. And I think that filter goes away when we die.
right.
So now I use the term heaven again because I think it's the closest thing. It's the closest word that I can come up with to explain, like, when we return to the one, when we feel that divine love without any filters anymore, without any limitations, without the sort of fears and smallness that we experience in human form.
Right. It's for me, it's being able to live in the present moment. That every time you do that, you get a glimpse of what is heaven. You know, there are so many, like Ram Dass. You know, obviously the Tibetan book of Living and Dying played a huge role in his life because they wrote, he and Timothy Leary wrote a book based off that on their psychedelic experiences, comparing it to that. The Tibetan book of the Living and Dying says that when you die, your spirit in your soul, or whichever it is, whatever we call it, doesn't know you're dead. It's still trying to interact with everything around you. But then, you know, you have all these theories of what's going to happen. Do you return straight to the source and stay there? Ram Dass said that if you believed in a literal hell and a literal heaven, that when you died, you could experience both of those initially. So if you believed you were going to hell, you may experience that initially when you die, because that's what happens. Vivekananda said that when you die, who you are is who you are going to be in the afterlife. So if you was a person, so I mean, you have all these differing approaches and theories, and in the end, I love Anita Morjani. She had caused Wayne to change his views. He no longer believed in reincarnation. He believed in the parallel lives thing that she said that she was shown. And I heard it.
Wow.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that.
He said that.
Oh, so tell me about parallel lives, because that sounds like what I believe.
Right. So Anita.
But I haven't put a word to it.
So Anita Morjani, when she came back, said that she was shown by that love that what we think is reincarnation is just the fact that, so past lives, where we think we've experienced past lives, they're from her understanding, they're lives that are being lived in a parallel universe at this time. And so that time is not linear. We live it in a linear way, but the time is happening across multiple platforms and multiple lives and multiple experiences. So I don't know how. Obviously, none of us understand all of it, but that deja vu is something that so if this is just a theory, if there are multiple parallel universes that you and I live in, which there is physics experiments that say that it's most likely possible, that we are all still connected to that one consciousness. So deja vu may be something that happened in the other universe that now you're experiencing as a result of that where you can turn right in this universe, you may turn left in that universe. So where, and that's, I forget the name of the test, but like when they shoot rays of light or something like that through, or photons here in physics experiments, you can never predict which way it's going to turn when it gets into this. It's called it's a double something experiment. And so it may turn right. And so you would think the next time you shoot that same ray through that same hole, it's going to turn right and it'll turn left. And you can never predict it. And that's happening in multiple universes at the same time. But then Ram Dass would say,
sounds like
reincarnation isn't linear, that you could be reincarnated today back in the 1500s. If you somehow you left this incarnation today, you could be dropped in the middle of the 1500s. So,
well, if time is an illusion and we are all one, that puts a lot of questions in my mind. And we don't need to have these answers.
Right.
Like, I think it's fun to explore this. I know Wayne Dyer thought it was fun to explore this. A lot of people I know don't think it's fun to explore this. But you and I, we're on the same page here. But so if time is an illusion and we are all one, like, we could be living multiple lives at the same time. We could be in more than one place at one time. But then how do you define yourself? That's the part that really gets me, is how do I define the me that's living this life? And a lot of people, as of late, have been talking about past lives and past life therapy and bringing up these memories for purposes of understanding the emotions and patterns and traits that we're exhibiting in this life. And it can help you to understand maybe this wound that you're carrying and then give you something useful for this life. But I think that may be so. I'm not like it could be like, what was it? Eleanor Roosevelt that said, I don't think it'd be any stranger to show up in another life than it was for me to show up in this one. Right? It may absolutely be. I don't know, but I'm not one of those people who is like, yes, absolutely past lives, because I feel like we're connected to the lives of those who have come before us. Like, there's memory in the land, and the energy of these people who lived before us are still here. Maybe the energy of people who are coming in the future are here too. I don't know. There's a lot of unknowns about that. But for me, I could just as easily be connecting to the energy of an old medicine woman who lived before, as opposed to being been her. Like, maybe I was her in another life. Maybe this is the energy of someone who really lived, who, like, I feel her presence. And I think that either way, it's just as useful, because it means you have a resonance with that person.
Right.
I know Wayne Dyer talked about feeling connected to St. Francis of Assisi.
Yeah.
There were times that he said he thinks he was St. Francis of Assisi. I do think all of that is possible. Or maybe he just really resonated. Maybe there was something that vibrated on the same frequency in both of them, and he felt that and he resonated with that.
Right.
Two men, different times in the world, but something similar in their heart, something similar in their mission. So I love the saying of have a mind that's open to everything and attached to nothing, because I think once you attach yourself to an idea 100%, you close yourself off to all other possibilities.
Right. Yep. I was listening to a YouTube that was sent to me by a friend of mine at Spiritual Center about spiritual ego. And that was one of the things that, we just attach to one thing, and then we just go all in on that one thing. But another problem is that then we spread so thin that we never do just pick our own course. So it's balancing, it's everything, duality, balancing. And so, but what's interesting, we talk about reincarnation, these books actually do talk about that reincarnation is a choice that you make with God before you die. The ultimate goal of the teachings of Christ consciousness that the masters taught was that youth is the promise to everybody, that we live to be old because we believe we're supposed to grow old. That Christianity especially The 70 years, it's said, and you'll get 70 years. But that the Eastern philosophies understand that that's when life actually begins, whereas in Christianity and in the West, we believe that's when life actually ends. So, like we know the caste system has all of its issues, but one of the issues, one thing it does is that a householder at age 70 stops caring for everything else and lives the life of the spiritual person, and
becomes the sage,
right? And so that's what the teachings were, that the goal was to become enlightened, and you do that by becoming alive in your Christ consciousness. And when you do that, your body then becomes spiritual, and that you can then hop back and forth between the different levels of consciousness, and you could take your body with you. And that's what Jesus did at his resurrection, and that there were several others that were, there were 30 to 40 of these masters who were doing that, taking in and out. And then one man actually died. He was an old man, and he died while they were there. And then the next day they were introduced to him again, and he was 30 or 40 years old. Yeah, Chandler Sen, I think was his name. Yep. And so they asked what happened, and he said,
it's like Benjamin Button.
Right. So what had happened was he believed in dying in old age. And as soon as he got in the presence of God, in that presence of love, it clicked that he didn't have to. And he was sent back to his body, resurrected, and he became one of their guides, and they hung out with him a lot after that. But so the goal is, according to this, reincarnation is something you agree to in those dying moments with God. Are you where you need to be to bring your body with you? And if not, because even Baird T. Spalding, he left this incarnation, he left this body knowing all of these truths. And even Wayne, I think of Wayne Dyer, he left this body knowing these truths, but he may have said, I know there's still a little bit more. Or you can come back like a bodhisattva. You love humanity so much, you want to go again and continue to teach and show them. So reincarnation is said to be a choice, but never necessary. Never necessary. And that's, again, it's just a theory. We can't know that to be true. But
I imagine Wayne, when he died, as being excited to expand. Like, I can reach so many more people at once from here. Like, I feel like if he was given a choice, maybe he felt like that was the next rung on the ladder. He spoke about this many times. I'm sure you probably heard him say this, about that he felt like, and I can't remember who the quote originally comes from, but that a ladder is placed before you in your life.
Okay.
Anyway, he said he felt like he'd been climbing the rungs of those ladder to become more and more who he really is, to be more his true self, and that he felt like he had gotten to the top of that ladder, and that the next step was death. And so I don't think he was eager to die. I think he had a lot of ideas he was spinning at the time about things he still wanted to do. He was still enjoying talking, but I don't think there's anything that he felt like he needed to still do here, that he could have kept himself busy and entertained and feeling on purpose for a long time. And it just seemed to me, and this is a very human, wounded, grieving perspective, but it seemed to me that he got so good at being human. He got so good at understanding his thoughts, about knowing that we're more than these bodies, about, connecting with people in really deep and meaningful ways and living on purpose. And then it ended. It's like what they say about parents. You get really good and then your job's over.
Right.
And I felt like he was so good at being human, and it felt like such a loss, like such a tragedy. Like, what was it all for? Except when I have that idea of him sort of stepping into more fullness, stepping into the oneness, stepping back into divine love, stepping back into expanding it. I still think he's busy down here on earth. Like, I still think he's interacting with people. I hear people all the time who tell me that, he visits them when they're meditating or they get signs from him. And, like, I think he's still around, and not just Wayne. Like, Wayne was just a human,
Right.
not just Wayne, lots of people, but because he felt really driven to connect people and teach them, I think he still wants to guide.
Yes, yes. And it's, he, it was a shock, but then you had Ram Dass who got to prepare for his death. They had it all set up. They had the dry ice ready when he died December 22nd, 2019. They put his body on dry ice and they meditated in his room for 3 days before they called the. So, I mean, it's just like you have these two that were really close, lived on Maui together because of what Wayne did for him. It's like one left, just boom. It's just like he's there, he's not. And then you have Ram Dass and just the two ways that two spiritual giants that started off on the same path, psychology, and then, took two totally different paths. But, even Wayne had Hindu teachers that he was close to. And even one sent him a meditation, a mantra, said you need to teach it. This was based on John chapter 1, the word became flesh. And that became one of his mantras, and he would say it all the time. And then he wrote about that. So, I mean, it's just, the paths that they took. And neither one of them, I mean, I know Ram Dass would have said, I'm not enlightened. But, it's just they're your followers. And I was just listening to that earlier. You don't declare yourself to be enlightened. If you do, then you're probably not. And neither one of them would have, but the rest of us look at him and say, like you said, he was such a great human. He was just doing it so great. And so once you get to that point, there's no use in being human anymore.
Ram Dass's humility was part of his path, was part of his practice.
Right.
And I think as soon as you think you're better than somebody else, you lose it. And so, one of his most famous quotes, we're all just walking each other home. Right. I think that's so important. One of my teachers, Kyle Gray, was very clear to point out that I'm not above you. I'm not more spiritual than you. Like, think of us as spiritual running buddies. And I totally subscribe to that idea that we're equal and we're one. And as soon as okay, so let's say you go to like an I Can Do It seminar, which I don't think they have those anymore. Maybe they call them something else. But let's say you go to like a seminar and there's these people on stage, and it's really easy to make the assumption that the person on stage has something that you don't, or is somehow more advanced. But really, everybody has something to teach. They're just the ones on the stage at the moment. And if we don't know that, then we won't step forward and speak. If we think that, oh, this is just for a select few, but it's really for all of us.
Right. Ram Dass would say, yes, it's my name and it means servant of God, but Ram is rent a mouth, and that's all I am. I'm the mouth, you're the ears, but it's the one thing working through all of us. And if you think I'm the teacher and you're the students, then we've got a long way to go here tonight. So just see me as the mouth, you're the ears. But he said, I'm saying my mantras over and over and over, so I'm not even here. So
I wish they were still here with us, but they left so much. They left so much to show us the way. All the breadcrumbs are there, and right. I'm really thankful for that. So, some people have said that Wayne Dyer, were he not to have died in 2015, probably would have written about the life and teachings of the Masters of the Far East, because it was the books that he was studying right up until the end in that last year of his life. So let's get back to some of the stories in there. Like, I mean,
incredible
this
stories.
Is kind of a broad question, but I'm just sort of thinking like what was it that he was so passionate about in these books? And I know you mentioned to me that you thought it validated a lot of his spiritual beliefs.
Right. They were written in the stories take place 1894 to 1897, and I'm telling you, every thought that you hear from spiritual teachers, everything. I mean, I've listened to a plethora of them over the last year and a half, and from Wayne Dyer to Ram Dass to Sadhguru to, let's see, Muji, Gangaji. I mean, just the teacher I sit under. I mean, everything. I mean, it's just all in here. Every single thing about who you are, how to accomplish, what to do, that you are already perfect, that you are already God. I mean, I was going through, and it's like, I have so many quotes that I could just share with you that just drive home each and every point that.
Let's hear
some. It's like, okay. I'm getting older, so I have to.
We're getting ready now.
Right, so let's. It starts out, it's Christmas time in the book, and just, oh my goodness, you just can't believe how they describe Christmas here in this book. So, let me see. Here's just one introduction. I'm not going to read about the Christmas thing. It was just beautiful, though. I'm just telling you just the way that they viewed.
Which book is that?
This is just book 1. And
okay.
So there's a striking resemblance between the life and teaching of Jesus of Nazareth and those of the masters as exemplified in their daily life. It has been thought impossible for man to derive his daily supply directly from the universal, to overcome death, and to perform the various so-called miracles that Jesus performed while on earth. The masters prove that all these are their daily life. They supply everything needed for their daily wants directly from the universal, including food, clothing, and money. They have so far overcome death that many of them now living are 500 years of age, as was conclusively proved by their records. I mean, quote after quote, and that's why I started reading this again, and I'm just like, it's just
miracles.
Yeah, but we call them miracles, and it's just daily life. It's just daily life. Can you not see that by using the highest law, the absolute law of God, you may bring forth that which you need or conceive in mind as your highest idea, and thus please God more fully by manifesting more fully, knowing as Jesus did that we are perfect sons of God. So manifesting, I'm listening right now to The Power of Intentions by Wayne Dyer as I do my walking. What was that based off of? Manifesting. You envision it, you live it. Wayne said, I never talk about what I don't want. Jesus said, ask and it will be given, seek and you shall find, knock and the door will be open unto you. And we turn it into this formula in Christianity, where I came from. It's this formula, and it's like, no, it's, if you ask, you believe you've already received it, and then you let go of the expectation. And that's the law of attraction. And that stuff is taught all throughout these books, and just so many different things. I have lots of things that I start in the first book, but let's go to the second book. Okay, is that okay?
All right. Number 2.
Book number 2, the speculative dogma of vicarious atonement, which is the belief that Jesus died for you because you were a sinner, a wicked sinner. Which has biased Christian thought for centuries, cannot be charged to the author of the Sermon on the Mount or the parable of the prodigal son. I said, look at his very teachings. How can you say that he thought you were worm? It's called worm theology. It's one of the hymns, he died for such a worm as I, or even Amazing Grace, to save a wretch like me.
Yeah.
So this is basically saying, how could you take those beautiful teachings and believe that the man who taught those would condemn you to a life in hell? So I just shared that one just for,
And Jesus talked about how pure the little children were. And I mean, you look at babies, and how could you say, oh, this beautiful, perfect infant, this miracle, comes into the world with sin? Like, I don't get it.
That's where there's theology involved in there, and that's where half of the Christian world now has what's called an age of accountability. And so you don't have to, they're still sinners, but they're not responsible for their sin until age 12, or the Amish, it's age 18. So in the,
Okay, all right. We'll give you that the babies are really cute,
Yes.
but by the time they're 8 or 12, they're rotten little scoundrels
Right.
and they need to be saved.
so with the Presbyterians, the ones that are born into the church are saved, and the ones who are born outside the church, then they will die and go to hell. So there's your Christian understanding.
There's going to be a lot of amazing people in hell if that's true.
Yes, and that's where one of the things my daughter says to me now. She said, based on your understanding of the Bible, I was ready to just go to hell if that's where I had to go. So,
Will she be in good company?
yeah,
I gotta
yeah.
say.
I mean, that's where Wayne would be, right? According to the Christians.
Oh, the heathen. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so here we go from page 13. It's hard for me to see the highlighted yellow in this light, but it says about Jesus, he realized that which for which he was seeking. So he realized that for which he was seeking was right within himself. He knew that in order to be the Christ, he must declare that he was the Christ. So that's him telling the, Baird T, Spalding, and all the people. He's like, listen, the reason I declared myself in that Bible to be Christ was because nobody was going to believe me, so I needed them to challenge me. And even history shows that the Pharisees were always there because they needed, according to Jewish tradition, they needed to verify every miracle that happened to see if this was the Messiah, the coming chosen one. And so Jesus said, I declared myself to be that, to prove that the Christ consciousness was at work in me. So, again, this is just all. I have 2 more out of this that I starred that I really needed to read. So let me read those. And then I have a few in book 3.
Yeah.
Okay. Despising everything else, a wise man should strive after a knowledge of self. For there is no knowledge that is higher or that brings more satisfaction of power than a knowledge of his own being. If a man knows his real self, which means his higher self, he cannot do otherwise than discover his latent possibilities, his concealed powers, his dormant faculties. Of what avail if a man should gain the whole world and lose his own soul? His soul is his spiritual self, and if he truly discovers his spiritual self, he can build a whole world if he is serving his fellow men by doing so. Again, these are just quotes. That's basically
Life of service.
these are conversations that are had with different masters. That wasn't even Jesus speaking. These are just, that's basically all it is. It's conversational and their investigation into certain things and the way that the masters could come and go. That quote that you read from Wayne about the light being with all men, the masters taught Baird T. Spalding's and his group how to literally light the darkness with their bodies, with the luminescent light that comes out of it. Because they were traveling these dark caves and they were alone, and the masters went with them, and all of a sudden their bodies lit up and they could see into the dark caves and the stuff places where they were. So and I mean, science now shows us that we do all have a light that shines. It just,
Really?
that physics is showing that we do all emit some type of light. So
I know there's been a lot of talk about like the magnetic field that comes out from your heart.
Yep.
But I hadn't heard about the light.
Well, then you also have the aura. My youngest child, Samantha, she can see auras. She can see the color around you at certain times. It's not at all times. But last time she said, I see it right now. You have a blue aura shining all around you.
So does she see when people are sick too?
She still teeters on the spiritual. She's coming into it.
Because I was gonna say, no pressure or anything, but sometimes people who can visually see the energy of a person like that can also see when there's a blockage or there's
Right.
a health issue. So,
She needs to be trained and taught.
Only if she wants
Right, so
to.
I'm
Just
saying.
because you have an ability doesn't mean you have to
Right,
pursue it.
trust me. I know
Absolutely.
because
Yeah.
Kendall, who I work with, she's a medium. And, we were talking
Mm-hmm.
about past lives and whether or not it's true or not. When she falls asleep at night, almost every night, she enters into either, a parallel life or a past life. And she says, I said, that's cool. She goes, I don't really think it was cool. I don't get to sleep much at night. I said, I meant it's cool that you're reaching those levels of that I'm not reaching
Not
right
really,
now.
Dad.
Right. I'm just saying, but I've come to I say this to my friend Scott, who lives not far from you up on Whidbey Island.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's just not meant for me right now in this lifetime. It's not. So
Yeah.
I don't pursue getting into those higher levels right now. When I go into meditation, I'm just happy with whatever happens. I'm not trying to reach, through transcendental meditation, go to this higher levels.
Well, I don't think one is better than another.
Right.
Like, so Kyle Gray, again, he's a Hay House author. He's known as the Angel Guy.
Right.
He taught me oracle cards. So he had some incredible things happen when he was younger, and he actually has seen people's angels, like with his eyes, or see them in the room. And you'd think, oh wow, like that's amazing. Like he must be better. He must
Right.
be really good
It's
at
not.
this. But then other people will feel the energy, or they will just have a thought pop into their head. Like there's a lot of different ways of receiving things, and seeing it visually isn't necessarily better.
Right.
In fact, I think it breaks the seal a little bit. I think it breaks the illusion a little bit that is required for us to have this human life. We have to have that veil, and if the veil went away, I think it would be really hard to function. And actually, I think sometimes
Right.
psychosis is caused by things like that. Like sometimes people who are hearing and seeing things are really hearing and seeing things,
Right.
but you lose that groundedness. But oh yeah, there's a lot that is happening in the world of the unseen. I absolutely believe that. My great uncle was a medium in Belgium, so that must have been 1800s.
Yeah.
And they used to do seances, and the message that got passed down through the family to me was, it's real, scary stuff happens, don't do it. So the message that I got was, it's real.
Yeah, that's all I hear. Yeah.
But I do think that even from my own experience, if you're working with energy, if you're opening to spirit, you really have to be conscious that you are in charge of what comes into your space.
Right.
And that you are choosing to turn it on and turn it off. And anytime somebody comes to me with an interest in energy work, that is the first thing that I talk about, and it's the first thing I would say to your daughter, which she probably doesn't need to be told this, but were she to gain an interest in exploring, what is this that's happening? My first teaching would be grounding and protection.
Right.
And knowing that you can say no to it. Like if you sense an energy coming towards you, you can say no or not now. That we have that control. I even think Jesus talked about that. I don't know what it was.
Right. I'm trying to think.
I'm not as religious as you, Tim. I'm sorry.
Right. Well, if Jesus said it, trust me. I mean, I read the New Testament for 9 straight years every day. One passage from it, so I know it pretty well. But yeah, I mean, it's just. But even in the New Testament, Paul talks about that. All you got to do is resist what he called the devil. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. But I see the devil as the ego, is what he was always referring to, the ego. But
Yeah.
these energies, listening to this guy today that I was listening to, he's like, don't say it's the person attacking you. Say it's the energy. It's the energy. Because he's talking about negative reviews on his books on Amazon. And he's like, it's just energy. That's it. So it's the energy that's coming after me, not the person. So don't blame the person. It's the energy. So, and all we got to do is resist the energy. We, empaths especially, which I have.
Or transmute it.
Right.
Right? Transform it.
Right.
Yeah.
To bring it. So if we can be channels, which is what these books teach you, by the way, if you are operating out of love, you should never be exhausted afterwards. Because think about that. A lot of times we go out and we serve or we do things and we're exhausted. And this book says that if you're exhausted afterwards, you are using up your supply and not letting God's supply flow through you. And so
I know some people who are Reiki healers, and it's really important that when they're sending energy to another person, that they're not sending it from their body, but that they're bouncing it up from the higher source. Yeah,
right,
because you don't want to just drain yourself into somebody. And it's not just, I mean, everything's energy, so it's not just energy work.
Right, everything is energy. In that, this book teaches it is book 2 that they ask about healing, and he said it's really just all of us are healers. We all have the ability to heal. It's just, again, like I'm studying metaphysical, it's basically metaphysical Christianity, but metaphysical science when it comes to these things. And it's all whatever you believe. If you believe, then it has the possibility of taking hold in you. That doesn't mean if you have it that you're the cause of it, but you can be healed. That's just one of the belief systems of metaphysicals. That's one of the belief systems of this book. It's the belief system of most spiritual traditions. But in the end, you have the teaching in Eastern, especially Eastern traditions, that you and God agreed, you and Source agreed to your role when you came here. And that you also most likely, as Wayne Dyer said, as soon as the sperm hits the egg, your death has already been determined. But most spiritual traditions teach that you've already made this agreement with Source before you came here. And that even as scary as this is, that even somebody like Hitler made an agreement with Source to come here and play the role, completely responsible for it. Just like the Ramayana, which I have sitting over there, Ram Dass's scripture. That's the scripture for him. It's all about this evil demon god. But in the end, he was trying to get Ram to kill him because you get to skip reincarnation if Ram kills you, if God kills you. And so he was trying to get Ram to kill him so that he could be enlightened. So even that evil person kidnaps God's wife, because Ram was God on earth, it was an avatar, like Jesus was an avatar. But his motivation was spiritual enlightenment. He went about it the wrong way. But just like he was trying to commit suicide by God, instead of suicide by police shootout. So there's so much.
Yeah, you got to go through the mountain, not around the mountain. Right. That's life. I remember Wayne used to say that life is a sexually transmitted terminal condition. Like that's how we get here. We're definitely not here forever. We're here temporarily. I understand that better than ever since my dad left, like actually died. And I think for me, even though I had lost people, I was so close to him that really brought it home. Like, wow, okay, this really is temporary. This really is temporary. And sometimes that's a big heaviness, and sometimes it's a motivation, because I feel more fearless than I did before, because what have we got to lose, And can you imagine, we come through this life and then we look back, we're going to be like, why didn't we take those chances?
Right.
Why didn't we speak up? Why didn't we follow our heart? Why didn't we quit that job that we hated? Right?
Right. But I did. I always have. And that's what's unique about, I'm finding out through this thing called human design, which is a whole huge another topic. It's astrology mixed with the I Ching, mixed with Kabbalah, and all these different mystical things. But it was a download from God by this one man in the 1980s. But my human design chart, which is basically an astrological chart, it just shows you about who you probably are. That I'm a person that does go from thing to thing, learning what I can in order to show other people what I've learned. That really helped me, because I thought I'd failed at so many things. And I even asked that when I did my reading with Kendall, the medium, and she said, no, you didn't. It's not that you're failing at all this stuff. And then my human design chart says, based on who you are, this is what you are. And my chart says that I'm going to be a mirror, that if people want help, I can help them by reflecting back to them the things that they need to work on, but never without being asked. That's the hardest part of being a healer, is you need to be asked to help. So, and that's...
Yeah, the key to being of service is you can't save anybody.
Right.
You can offer them a light, but you can't save them. And it's really up to all of us to find our own path. So how about one more quote from the books today?
Well, I started this one just from the end of this book. So this isn't from book 3. So this is the last one from book 2. I am consumed with wonder as to why men look upon any of their brothers as enemies. It comes so clearly that we all must be of the same family, the same source, the same cause. Would that not determine that there was room for all? If one brother chooses to see differently than we do, why should we say that he must perish? I see we cannot interfere, for if we interfere, we but retard our own development and isolate others. If we do this, our house will fall and crumble about our own heads. Now I see, instead of a limited race, a universal, eternal, limitless all coming from the one and returning to the one. So that's pretty beautiful, especially, the last year. It's not even been a year, since the election and all the turmoil and all the disagreement over vaccines and non-vaccines and Biden and Trump, and just in this little portion of the world, just all the division, and we're just all one. That's just it. We're all one. And so that was the last quote I'm going to share from the books, but you can see that was a teaching from the Masters of the Far East. I mean, it all relates to here and now. Because first of all, as we said, life, it's not linear. These truths, that's what drew me out of Christianity, was that in Christianity, there's a mystical thread, that in Islam, there's a mystical thread, that in Judaism, there's a mystical thread, that in Buddhism and Hinduism and Baha'i and all this, there's a mystical thing, and they're all saying the exact same things because they've all been awakened in different places to the same truth. And that's what these books just drive home for me, that it's truth never dies. That doesn't mean my truth is the truth. I have to live my truth. But my truth should be represented in the whole truth. And it will be. That even, just again, like that YouTube video I watched today, that everybody's path is important. Just because you think your spiritual path is leading you somewhere great, that person who hates God and hates spirituality, that path is just as important as yours, which is hard to understand because there are a lot of evil actions in this world, a lot of evil actions. But you have to get to what is the cause. Is it mental illness? Is it a true cry for love and they just don't know how to get it? And so they try to take it in the way that they know how to take it. So
there's two forces in the universe, love and fear. And when we see someone acting in atrocious ways, we know that doesn't come from love.
Right.
And you can't give what you don't have. So what happened to that person? What experience are they going through? That doesn't mean we condone their actions. No. But I think there is space for compassion, even for the soul, the essence, the higher version of everyone who walks this earth at this time. There is a lot of conflict that's very visible, but it's so easy to be like, oh, these times we live in and we're in a pandemic and there's all this division in our country and all of that. But when you think back to our grandparents' time and the world wars that they were going through and the challenges that they faced, the Great Depression, the Spanish flu, which didn't really come from Spain.
Yes, I know.
Like all of these things, like difficulties are not new.
No.
Like this is just our brand of challenges for this time. There's still so much love. There's still so much, there's enough for everyone. I really think there's enough for everyone. But when we're hoarding because we're afraid or because we see someone else as other, that divides us. If you see someone as your brother or your sister or a piece of you, which we all are, how can you deny them the basic necessities of life? And it has to start from love. It has to start from love. But, you know, maybe this is one way that we do that. We come together and we share our thoughts. And something that's interesting to me is the history of spirituality, because the more I talk about these topics, the more we have these conversations, it always goes back to so many things that have been talked about for thousands and thousands of years. And then I hear about like the spiritualism movement in the 1800s and the early 1900s that spawned the Rider-Waite tarot deck. I'm a tarot nerd, so I love the history of tarot. And that's something to me that like there have not only been these ideas that are passed down, there have been organizations that have been sort of connecting to one another, and that so many of the words that we use today and the concepts that we talk about, they're not new.
Right.
So one of these days, I want to dive deeper into the history of spirituality and also how it connects to religion, which I think is something that's been a big part of your personal path. And I want to thank you again for how much you've shared with me and with everyone who listens to this podcast. You are certainly not alone in your experiences. And it touches a lot of people that, for one, there is life outside of religion.
Yes.
There is God outside of religion. You know, you and I have talked about Christian mysticism, which is very much Baird T. Spalding. Yes.
Yes.
I mean,
they were accused of being Christians, even though they were Indian and had a Hindu background, but they were called Christians. And even a Buddhist had tried to have them arrested, but Buddha stepped in and stopped it from happening. So that was good. A Buddha to step in. So.
Thank you, Buddha.
Yes.
And when you and I first met, I think you said, I have a picture of Wayne Dyer, Ram Dass, and Jesus in my sacred space. And I was like,
yep.
That's exactly...
Yep.
My dad's in here too. But that's exactly who I have in my sacred
They're
space.
all right here.
So I want to thank you so much for... right
Maharaji's
there.
there with him too. Maharaji. I think Ram Dass and Maharaji just have to go together from my perspective, so he's here.
They do, but you know what? I realize that what I see when I look in Ram Dass's eyes is Maharaji. Right. So even though I didn't know Maharaji in the beginning, I knew Ram Dass, and therefore I knew Maharaji because he's in there.
Which means you know Hanuman too.
So much to learn, so much to talk about. Thank you for coming on. What is the best way for people to reach you?
I have my Facebook page, which Tim Nixon, but I also have a coaching page now that I post on almost every day. Not always my own thoughts, but I do some videos. And that is Fully Awake. Fully Awake. What do I call it? Just Fully Awake Coaching.
Coaching?
Yes. Well, it used to be FC because of fitness and coaching. But I dropped the fitness.
Yeah, Tim does some videos on there that are really inspirational. I think you do your little morning meditation. You're out there and you share some thoughts with us.
Right. So, and then I forgot to mention this, but Sunday when I taught, I had Wayne's books there with me. You know, his translation, you know, his thought, his Tao Te Ching, and then his book, and shared with them, you know, his thoughts on that. And so Wayne was there with me my very first. He's the one that introduced me to the Tao Te Ching, and he was there with me on Sunday when I taught. So But I have one last interesting
That's beautiful.
fact I wanted to share with you about Baird T. Spalding before we go.
Yes.
This morning in my studies, came across the fact that it was controversial that he may not have actually physically gone to India in 1894, that he astral planed to there and experienced all of those experiences through astral planing. And so I came across that this morning. I thought everybody should know that the books are, so there's suspicion about whether or not he actually went, but to me it doesn't matter, because it's the truths are the truths, whether he wrote them through spiritually going or through physically going, but they're pretty incredible.
Yep, whether he physically traveled to the Far East or whether he astral planed there, the heart of the message is in there, and it spoke to Wayne, it spoke to you, it spoke to us today. If you had one message you could leave with everyone, what would you say?
You do not have to search outside of yourself to find the truth. That the wisdom, this is how I say it, the wisdom of all the sages of all the ages is available to you now through the Christ consciousness and through the collective cloud. And that the reason I study so much is basically we don't learn new things, we remember things that we've forgotten. So I study a lot so that what other people are remembering, I want to remember too. So, but it's all available to you within yourself.
I love that. Go within.
Yes.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you for having me.
And for all our listeners, yes, for all our listeners, thank you for following Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, and telling your friends about it. The full video for this episode will be available to my subscribers on Patreon. You can get the link for that and more details about this podcast at nadiadelacruz.com. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of each other. Namaste.
Namaste.